Hello, Baker Econ students. I hope everyone had a great weekend. The Chiefs squeaked out a win, so that was good. For this week, you're going to continue to do your forum discussion post, work in the My Econ lab, and continue to think about the common assessment. If you have questions with that, definitely I'll address those more later in the course, but do reach out to me via email. A little bit about the past week. Unemployment numbers came out. That was fairly positive. I think it was at 3.9% unemployment rate, but there's a lot of people that perhaps have no longer participated, or what we call labor force participation in the workforce, or maybe decided to retire early. So there's still concerns out there about trying to hire employees or needs for certain sectors of different industries. So, and this week, if you get a chance, I think that also the consumer price index and producer price index will come out. So we'll see how that impacts markets. So the main thing for this week, you're going to be reading about chapters 4 and 5. I want to give you a little bit of overview of that. And before I do that, just a reminder that I will try to get everything graded by Tuesday late in the evening. I may get it graded before that. Also with the forum discussion post, you guys are doing a great job. I think I was able to post everybody this week. In coming weeks, as I get busier with school starting up my job, I may only respond to half of you, but know that I am reading your post. But we'll just kind of see how the rest of the semester goes. And I'll kind of take turns in different weeks who I respond to. So, all right, with chapter 4, with that chapter, you're going to first look at the idea of consumer surplus. Consumer surplus was first thought of the idea by Charles Dupuy, who was a French engineer in the 1700s, that questioned how much somebody would be willing to pay to go over a toll bridge. At what point they would say, I'm not willing to pay that price anymore. So if you were going out to Lawrence and going on the turnpike and say it's $3, at a price of $5, would you find an alternative route? And why it's important is that we know that there are, when we buy a good or service, there's a certain dollar or certain price in our head, the most we're willing to pay versus what we actually pay. And if we pay exactly what we were willing to pay up to, then we have zero consumer surplus. But say you were willing to pay $5 for something that only cost you $3, you had $2 of consumer surplus. So there's a benefit that's derived from the area below the demand curve but above the price. And we can measure that consumer surplus as an area of 1/2 times the base times the height of that triangle. So we can also do that same thing with producer surplus. There are individuals that were willing to, say, paint my house for let's say $3,000, and if I paid somebody $3,500, they had $500 of producer surplus. So again, that is something we can measure as an area of a triangle when you do your readings this week. The question that comes into play is that what happens when markets are not allowed to clear or equilibrium established? What the authors are going to discuss is something called a deadweight loss, and it's that there's this loss of both consumer surplus and producer surplus because we can't reach that equilibrium. And the deadweight loss, I just want you to think of it this way. It just means that something else is produced in the society, in our economy. It's not this deadness in the sense that it's, there's a total loss, but it's just that goods and services are shifted to some other form of production. There are people that would like to consume that good or produce that good, but because there's distortions in the market caused usually by a price floor or price ceiling, that can cause a deadweight loss. So those are the two main ideas you're going to look at. One being a ceiling, like a rent control. So it's thinking it can't go above that price. As long as the ceiling is above the equilibrium, say Johnson County said you can't charge more than $1,500 for one bedroom apartment. If the equilibrium is $1,000, there's no issue. But if they set a price ceiling that says the most you could charge is $800, and the equilibrium is $1,000, there's going to be a problem because there's a lot more people who want $800 apartment. There's fewer people that own apartments who are willing to supply that at $800. So you're actually going to get a shortage in the market. The other one is with the price floor. We've seen a lot of debate about that recently. Even in Missouri, where I live, it's going up to went up to $11.15 in the start of January 1st. It's going to go up to $12 next year. So similar concept, can't go below that price. So if you establish a minimum wage of $11.15, well, the equilibrium wage, I think my kid at Chipotle makes $13.50 an hour. As a 19-year-old, part-time working there when he's just a freshman in college. Well, that's well above the minimum wage, so the equilibrium wage is much higher. The problem exists if you establish a wage of, say, $15, say you have to pay everybody $15, and the equilibrium is only about 13 or 12, you're going to have a problem. So that's where we don't allow the markets to clear. So the question a lot of times it begs is, when the government intervenes in a market and establishes a ceiling or floor, although they have good intentions, they can also cause many problems by doing so, and it may even result in more unemployment. So you'll read about those. Some other things I make sure I want to point out in that chapter is you're going to read about the impact of taxes. And I really want you to think of the tax you think about an intercept of a supply curve. If the tax was on the producer, I want you to think of the supply curve shifting out, or the intercept of that supply curve shifting up, if you will, by the amount of the tax. Now we can also put taxes on consumers too, and think of that if there's a tax on consumer, it's probably going to shift that demand curve in. But the tax incidence, especially on goods that we call sin goods like cigarettes or liquor, if the demand is very inelastic, it's usually the consumer that's going to pay the majority of that tax, and very little is going to be borne upon the producer. So, all right, in chapter 5, you're going to read about quite a bit about externalities. They could be negative externalities like pollution in land, water, air. They can also be positive externalities. In the example with hopefully getting more people vaccinated, we're more likely to try to eliminate the spread of COVID. We've done that with polio and measles and other things. You don't even hear of those diseases anymore because people got vaccinated. But education is another good example of a positive externality. We want more people to be educated. If the more people are educated, then we would be able to enjoy a more productive society. There's been push for trying to get more individuals to go to college, because if they go to college, they can improve their standard of living. So you all are in college right now, going to graduate school. You're trying to improve your own standard of living and contribute to the economy by becoming more efficient, more productive, and all those things. So the government may often subsidize loans, or they might, when you do your tax this year, give you a Hope Education credit in the hopes that you'll shift your demand out for education. So one of the interesting things in this chapter, first you'll read about, is the Coase theorem. And the idea is that generally, if the transaction cost, the bargaining cost to try to reach an agreement are low, you can probably get to a solution. They also stress that importance of private property rights, and I truly believe that you have to have private property rights. That's important for an economy to do well. We have seen other economies like command-style economies of the former Soviet Union, without those incentives of private property rights, it's just disastrous. So, but in terms of trying to deal with externalities, oftentimes the government would intervene, especially if they feel that it's hurting the economy or hurting society. So I'll give you a quick example. In California, my sister used to manage tanning salons years ago, and they implemented a tanning tax. And the idea was to try to prevent people going to the tanning salons, or reduce that for the fear of skin cancer. If people have skin cancer, they're not living well, and then medical costs go up for everyone. So, and I asked her, will the tanning tax have much an impact on her business? She said, absolutely not. You'll still pay whatever the additional 10% is, but you'll see these often on cigarettes or anything else. The textbook talks a lot, I believe, about sugar taxes, like on sugary drinks, try to prevent obesity. That if you set a higher price, the hope that people would cut back on the amount of sugar that they're consuming. So, and that's a lot of the debate about, what is that intervention in markets? Does it work? How do incentives work? They're trying to influence certain types of behaviors, either to improve health of individuals or to reduce the pollution in the environment. So in your posting this week, you're probably going to be able to find a lot more on the negative externalities that exist out there. But if there are other things you can find relative to tax incidents, you can also post about that too, or consumer and producer surplus. But I'm guessing a lot of it will be based on Chapter 5. So I hope everybody has a great week. Looking forward to talk to you online. But if you do have any questions, do reach out to me via email. and we'll talk to you online. Take care.